I was always so terrified, but I felt like I had to do this to protect my sister and even my brothers. I would just tell myself, I can do it. I can do it. I was going to let my uncle touch me, let him use me as his doll, his plaything. I was barely a teenager, and I was ready to lose my innocence. So I live in Brazil with my parents, my sister, and my brothers. My mother's family lives in the north, and my father's in the south. And one day I received the news that my uncle would be coming to live with us while he worked at my father's company. I was a bit surprised since we already had so many people under one roof, but family's family. As soon as he arrived, he told me he was going to be the best uncle in the world and that he'd always be there for us when we needed him. My feelings went from being surprised to being extremely excited that he'd be not just family, but a friend. For the first few months, he would pick us up from school, take us to get food and snacks, and would buy us random gifts and clothes. This was all great and honestly unexpected. But I couldn't help but notice that he always did more for my sister and I than anyone else. Not only did we get more gifts, but we got more of his attention. He always chose us to go places with him, and at any chance he could, he would try to hug me or take my side. I wish it stopped there, because soon it got worse. He went on for another month doing this. Every day, if someone else were to pick us up from school, he'd be extremely angry and take it out on me. In his angry rants, he would tell me that I was selfish and that I didn't care about him, and he would say and do anything to make me feel guilty for not doing the things he wanted to do. Maybe this was normal for adults or between relatives. I didn't know. All I knew was I didn't like it and I was alone. I wasn't sure how I could tell anyone in my family, but I was so scared and afraid that they wouldn't believe me. In their eyes, he was the amazing uncle who loved us unconditionally and took care of us. But I knew that everything he did was just an excuse to be around me. I also knew that my parents would never believe me. They'd judge me and agree with my uncle and tell me that I'm selfish and need to appreciate him more. As much as I hated it, I continued to let him keep me close to him in ways that I knew weren't right. Then, one day, I caught him also trying to do the same to my little sister. In that moment, I freaked out. I knew exactly how horrible and terrifying he was, and I couldn't let it happen to her. She is even younger than I am. So my plan was to get closer to him, go with him anywhere, whenever he wanted, just as long as it was away from her. I started to let him touch my body more, as if I were a doll. I was always so terrified, but I felt that I had to do this to protect my sister, and even my brothers. I would just tell myself, I can do it. I can do it. I can do this for them. As much as I told myself this, deep down it was tearing me up, and I felt like I was dying inside. A few weeks later, my other uncle, from my mother's side, took me to the market with him as my whole family was having a barbecue. He was nothing like my horrible uncle, and I was feeling tempted to tell him everything that was going on with my other uncle. I remember always having a good relationship with him and my aunt, and I felt like I could not handle dealing with what was going on any longer. So I told him what was happening. I didn't give him all of the details of what was happening to me, but it was enough for him to understand. I remember his mouth falling open as he looked around quickly, worried. He was absolutely shocked, but he believed me. He told me everything was going to be okay and that he was going to do something about this. He assured me that something would change, and I began to feel confident that I wouldn't be dealing with this any longer. He was angry, but not at me. He put his hand on my shoulder, gently, not like my other uncle, and promised me that he would do something about this. For once, I felt safe. Days went by, and and I didn't hear about it from my parents. I was confused. I thought the issue was going to be brought up to them. I was crying in my room, thinking that I had told my other uncle what was happening for no good reason. My mother found me crying, and I had to tell her why. I said, "Someone's been touching me." But instead of the shock I expected, my mom was calm. "Ah, you're talking about your uncle, aren't you?" she said. But in her voice, there was no sign of concern. She continued, "Your aunt told me. You really shouldn't bother with little things. He helps us a lot around here. I'll bring it up to him since you're acting so outrageous over it, but he wouldn't do something like this." I was devastated. I began questioning myself, is this my fault? Is this something normal? I couldn't understand why she wouldn't believe me. I was completely destroyed. I began cutting myself, stopped eating, and couldn't do anything in my days other than try to sleep. I remember wondering if I made myself undesirable enough, would he stop? For weeks I was a mess, and I saw no escape. Until one day, I received the news that my uncle would be returning back south because he wasn't working well here. But I knew in my heart he was leaving because I finally spoke up about what he was doing to us. I felt as if a weight had been lifted off of me. From the time that I found out to when he left, I felt as if I had all the courage in the world. Once he left, I finally felt free. Free from the pain. It was finally over, and I was happy knowing that I saved my little sister from a life of trauma that would have been caused by him. I'm older now, and feeling so much better about my life with my uncle gone. Even still, the events that unfolded resulted in my development of haphophobia, which has been extremely difficult to deal with. Luckily, as time has gone on, it's gotten better. I may even let people touch me, with consent. I've been working towards forgiving my mother for ignoring what had happened to me, but I'm not sure she deserves it. I don't know if I'll ever forgive her with time, or if my fear of anyone touching me will get better. All I know is I stood up for my sister and myself, and I have never felt stronger.